Discover the incredible journey of the British monarchy, 1,000 years of hidden triumphs and Claire stood at the front of her dimly lit classroom, the remnants of sunlight struggling to penetrate the heavy drapes. The faces of her students, draped in the haze of distraction, flickered with the soft glow of cell phone screens. She fought against the sinking feeling in her chest. The reality of budget cuts and dwindling support for history education gnawed at her. A once stalwart flame of passion now flickered uncertainly under the weight of apathy and outdated textbooks. Doubt churned in her gut, invading each breath. Was this truly the legacy she wanted to leave? As she passionately spoke about Queen Elizabeth I's influence and the reigns of British monarchs, an unexpected rush of adrenaline surged through her veins when she recalled a family secret. A distant ancestor had once served as a royal advisor. Excitement sparked within her. History wasn't just dates and kings, it was a living, breathing tapestry woven through her own identity. Yet her students hardly raised their heads, their lack of engagement like sharp knives, cutting deeper into her enthusiasm. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Ryan, a young filmmaker who had volunteered to assist, challenged her to confront her fears. "Claire, this could be more than a history lesson," he said, his eyes bright. "Let's make a documentary, show the connections between their resilience and our American ideals." His optimism contrasted sharply with her simmering skepticism. What if the monarchy wasn't relevant? What if her passion was just misplaced nostalgia? A suffocating sense of dread grew as she battled her insecurities. What if she was just spinning her wheels? As they began to sculpt their narrative, Claire felt the weight of doubt sharpen. The customary path she had walked, one of textbooks and lectures, felt increasingly stifling. Would her colleagues dismiss her efforts, calling them elitist? Conversations around the staff room echoed harsh criticisms, undermining her confidence. Each dissenting voice was like a rock thrown into her carefully structured plan, sending ripples of uncertainty crashing through her resolve. Then came a devastating blow. Documents tied to her family's royal connection had gone missing, swallowed by time and oblivion. The fear rushed upon her. What if all that she fought for crumbled to dust? The faces of her students, still seemingly indifferent, transformed in her mind into judgmental specters, their eyes reflecting her escalating panic. As she paced her empty classroom late into the night, anxiety wrapped around her like a vice. Was she chasing an irrelevant dream? Would she be remembered as just a history teacher lost amongst the noise? Fueled by urgency and desperation, Claire teetered on the edge. The stakes were surging higher than ever. Her heart raced, every tick of the clock amplifying her internal chaos as she prepared for their showcase. In this moment, she faced the truth. Preserving her vision might mean confronting the very doubts that sought to drown her. Would she find the courage to fight for her interpretation of history? Would this documentary reveal the depth she feared lay dormant in her? Or would it prove to be the final blow to her dreams? As Claire wrestled with her doubts, a chilling realization of what was at stake began sinking in, leaving her teetering in uncertainty, destined to confront her identity head-on. Claire's mind raced with thoughts as the days passed, each one carrying the weight of impending decisions. She found herself in an endless cycle of second-guessing her abilities and the relevancy of her project. Each moment spent contemplating her ancestors' role in history only fueled her fears. What if she wasn't worthy of carrying that legacy? It was a gnawing sensation spiraling within her, suffocating the passion she had for the subject. With the showcase looming, tension turned into an electric urgency as she considered the potential her oration might unlock. What would it mean to share this exploration of monarchy and resilience, her personal narrative intertwined with the historical tapestry? She recognized that every student's expression of disinterest was a mirror reflecting her own struggles and vulnerabilities. After an insomniac night spent mapping out the documentary's framework, Claire made a rash decision. She would head to her family home, determined to uncover the lost family documents. With hope and apprehension tethered together, she ventured into the depths of her past, sifting through dusty boxes, frayed letters, and photographs. Each page turned, peeled back layers of her ancestry, revealing a sense of ownership over history that she had never embraced before. As she dug deeper, however, skepticism plagued her. What if her family's story was drenched in irrelevant nostalgia? Part of her grew frustrated with the quest, anxious that maybe she was grasping at straws. Yet, in the midst of her turmoil, a poignant realization hit her. History was not static. It was constantly being rewritten, shaped by each of us. In a particularly worn ox labeled Family History, she found a brittle document, a letter addressed to her ancestor bearing the royal seal. Clutching it to her chest, Claire took a moment to breathe. This was tangible evidence tying her to a legacy that she had almost disavowed. Suddenly, the flicker of her passion reignited with fierce determination. With new energy, Claire returned to the classroom, her newfound evidence under her arm. She paced energetically, envisioning how to incorporate her discovery into her presentation. This wasn't merely about teaching. It was a chance to ignite a transformation. Fire in her students, to challenge them to question their history and how it shaped their present. They might not yet see the value, she thought, but maybe they would feel it when her fervor resonated. However, doubts clawed at her again. Could a single history class change their perceptions? Or would her efforts only serve to mock their apathy? Each question was a brushstroke on the canvas of her mental state, painting a picture both rich with potential and murky with uncertainty. The day of the showcase arrived. An amalgamation of terror and exhilaration lit a fire within her. As she watched students file in, the weight of expectation pressed heavily upon her shoulders. This was her moment, the culmination of her research, her family's story, and her intense desire to forge a connection with the future generation. With all eyes upon her, Claire stood up, her heart pounding. This was more than a project. It was a declaration of her identity, of passion chasing away fear. Today, we're diving into something much greater than the past, she began, each word charging the air with energy. We're unveiling the threads that connect us all to a history shaped by resilience. Yet, just as she felt her rhythm settling in, the door creaked open. A familiar silhouette walked in, the school's administration, arms crossed, with an imposing presence that threatened to erase all the progress she had made. In a heartbeat, Claire sensed her confidence wavering as they stepped forward, their expressions unreadable. Was this an end or a beginning? The moment hung delicately, and the feeling of uncertainty morphed into a fray of fear. Would the culmination of her efforts be dismissed before it even began? Claire steeled herself, resolute in her mission, striving to find the balance between her determination and the opposition pressing in. The silence in the room was deafening. As Claire scanned the audience, students shuffling papers, some whispering, others seemingly oblivious to the unfolding drama, her throat tightened. The administrators stood like unyielding sentinels, their mere presence extinguishing the spark of confidence she had been nurturing for weeks. She could feel the sweat on her palms, her heart racing in a rhythm that threatened to sideline her words. What would they say? What would they decide? It was a moment pregnant with possibilities, but doubt dripped harshly into her chest, stirring the remnants of that familiar gnawing fear. But somewhere amidst the storm of anxiety, she found a small flicker of resolve. Pushing through the unsettling intrusion, Claire recalled the history she had so passionately delved into, the legacy of her ancestors, their triumphs and failures, the raw humanity underlying it all. In this moment, she was not just an educator, she was a link in the chain, a voice carrying forth untold stories that needed to be heard. Not only do we delve into history today, she found her voice, steadying against the tumult, but we expose its living essence, something that affects our present. Each word became conscious choice, laced with the weight of her rediscovered purpose. As she spoke, Claire's eyes locked onto a student's gaze, the flicker of approval igniting her spirit. She continued, detailing the tale of her ancestor, the letter that bore testament to their fortitude in the face of adversity. The initial tension in the room began to thaw, shifting slowly into intrigue. Yet the administrators remained, their austere expressions unwavering. Claire could sense their judgment, their skepticism, a thick fog enveloping her presentation. Would they decide this exploration was frivolous, a distraction rather than a valuable teaching mechanism? The thought tightened her chest further, but she pressed on, determined not to let their presence overshadow the story she fervently believed in. Resilience did not just build kingdoms, it shaped individuals. Each of you holds a story within, woven into the greater narrative that binds us all, she said, her voice rising with palpable passion. She could feel the students leaning in, their expressions shifting from apathy to curiosity. The narrative began to unfurl, as if inviting them to step into that history. However, she refused to ignore the looming figures behind her. Their very stances screamed authority, threatening her newfound courage. Claire's mind raced again. What if they deemed her interpretations insignificant? What if her enthusiasm was met solely with bureaucracy? The thought unspooled her focus, taunting her confidence as she tried to maintain her rhythm. The presentation reached its climax, but a fresh wave of uncertainty crashed over her. Just as she was about to make a poignant connection, one of the administrators cleared her throat loudly, demanding attention. The room's stillness turned to tension, Claire's heart plummeting. "Excuse me, Miss Reynolds," the administrator began, their voice stony. "We have concerns about the relevance and academic integrity of your content." The air thickened suffocatingly around Claire, and for a split second she felt her passion waver like a candle flickering in the wind. But as doubt crept back in, she confronted an inner realization. This was not just about defending her project. It was about asserting her place, her voice, and her belief in the connections that history created. The stakes had never felt higher. Just then, a student raised their hand and spoke up, their words piercing through the oppressive silence. "But isn't history all about understanding who we are? Isn't that worth discussing?" Claire's heart leaped. If one student could see it, then maybe she had illuminated a spark within others. The battle in her heart shifted. The need to fight for her project transformed into an opportunity to champion the importance of individual voices. They were brewing a revolution, not just her own, but one that blended their silent stories with hers. With every ounce of determination coursing through her, Claire prepared to face both her supporters and her detractors, readying herself for the confrontation that would define not just this moment, but also her path ahead. As the administrator's eyes narrowed, Claire felt the electric charge of the moment escalate. The time had come to face her fears head-on, ready to defend history's fundamental truth and her role in it. Would she rise to the occasion and defend her vision, or would the looming cloud of authority snuff out the light she sought to share? The rhetorical weight of the administrator's inquiry hung heavily in the air, each word ballooning in significance as Claire's resolve began to sharpen. She inhaled deeply, feeling a heightened sense of purpose roll through her like a wave.
It was not simply a challenge, it was an opportunity, a juncture where she could reclaim her narrative and light the path for her students. "Respectfully," Claire interjected, her voice resonating steadily, "history is not just a list of dates and events, it is the lifeblood of our identity. To question its relevance is to question the very fabric of who we are." Each inflection aimed to connect with the audience, to urge them to explore their own connections to the past. Behind her, the administrators shifted uneasily, but Claire pressed on, energized by the student's voice that had echoed her own inner thoughts. "Consider your own experiences, the stories that define you. Each trial faced, each triumph achieved has roots in our collective history." As Claire navigated through the room of attentive eyes, she began weaving in examples, intertwining her ancestors' struggles with lessons applicable to the lives of each student seated before her. She could hear the undercurrents of disbelief from the administrators, but a new layer of support blossomed within her. An unspoken solidarity emerged as subtle nods of agreement and glimmers of understanding reflected back at her from the students' faces. She recalled her own apprehensions, the nagging self-doubt that had circled like a vulture before her presentation began. It now sounded distant, seeming irrelevant amidst the unfolding dialogue. Adrenaline coursed through her veins, invigorating every word she spoke. This was what it meant to teach, to open eyes, to engage minds, to invite souls into their own history. Suddenly, the tension in the room shifted. "But, Miss Reynolds," another student piped up, "what if their concerns are valid? We respect the administration. Shouldn't we be careful with how we present our stories?" The honest question struck a chord in Claire, igniting a flash of doubt. She paused, her pulse quickening as she assessed the implications of this new perspective. Was she presenting her truths recklessly? Could her passion unintentionally undermine the educational values they all aspired to uphold? This intestinal conflict forced her to reckon with her beliefs head-on, revealing underlying layers of her vision. "Respect is crucial," Claire responded, choosing her words with thoughtful precision. "But true respect also means honoring the stories, our stories, that are often overlooked in favor of established narratives. We must cultivate an environment where every narrative is given its due weight. Our experiences shape our realities, and it is our duty to acknowledge that, even when it ruffles feathers." The words flowed from her, fueled by both her convictions and
the silent, simmering support of the students who were beginning to find their own voices among the echoes of her revelations. Yet Claire was not naive to the heavy footsteps of authority still looming behind her, still testing her at every turn. Those watchful gazes were anchored in a mindset that thrived on convention, and she was, for their sake, challenging a very foundation they found comfort in. As the administrator's expression remained set, Claire felt a depth of determination harden within her. Was the essence of her teaching not rooted in exploration, in creativity? What freedom existed within rigid confines? The unexpected challenge of the student had stirred something deeper inside her, crystallizing her purpose. It wasn't merely about the relevance of her content anymore. It was a clarion call to inspire her students to explore and voice their own narratives. She sensed that this moment could be pivotal, not just for her, but as a catalyst for broader changes within how history was taught. Standing there, breaths collectively held, she realized that every step she took forward was also a step toward redefining the space around her. It beckoned for something new and organic, rather than the managed conformity she had encountered so often. Her heart beat an electrifying rhythm, aligning with a newfound audacity. As this realization settled in, she spotted the faintest crack in the administrator's stoic facade. Perhaps this conversation was not only one to be had within the confines of the classroom, but it was also marking the beginning of a larger dialogue on education itself. The air shifted again, a moment thick with possibility.
Would Claire dare to push further, to insist on a re-examination of the very narratives that confined her and her students? The turning point was upon her, fraught with risk, yet burning bright with transformative potential. It was in turmoil like this that revelations were birthed, and as grains of courage began to settle firmly in her heart, Claire prepared to wield them boldly. The question loomed, suspended in the awkward silence that followed. Might she challenge the foundation upon which much of her teaching was built and create something fresh and resonant in its place? Claire's mind raced, adrenaline and doubt colliding like waves against a rocky shore. Every breath felt like a choice, a decision to either retreat to safety or surge forward into the unknown. The flickering candor in the student's eyes called to her, and with it the realization that the classroom could be a cradle for courage. "Ms. Reynolds?" The same student who had challenged her earlier raised a hand, weaving her voice through the absorbing atmosphere. "Are you saying we should change how we teach history?" The question echoed in Claire's ears. Change. The word hung in the air, potent and intoxicating. It sparked a vivid recollection of her own hesitations when she first embarked on her teaching career. Back then, the notion of rewriting accepted narratives had felt like aiming a cannon at the
very foundation of education. Yet now, that very foundation appeared ripe for reconstruction. "Absolutely," she affirmed, her voice rising with conviction. "We must adapt to the voices evolving around us. History is dynamic, not static." The admiration and curiosity radiating from the students further emboldened her, momentarily overshadowing the administrator's unyielding scrutiny. "Think about your narratives," she continued, leaning into the energy in the room. "Each of you has experiences that can reshape what we learn. Are we not denying a part of ourselves if we cling to established textbooks? We can create a living history that breathes alongside us." An explosion of murmurs surged through the classroom, an organic reaction both exhilarating and disconcerting. The other students leaned in, eyes wide with possibility, as they began to imagine a classroom alive with real stories, stories that resonated with their lives rather than feeling foreign and distant. Yet, as the realization of potential washed over her, Claire felt the clamp of anxiety tighten. What if she miscalculated? The risk of challenging the status quo evoked dread, raising simmering questions about consequences she had yet to fully grasp. Her mind turned rapidly, weighing the stakes. What would backlash look like? Would her job be safe if she stirred the pot too much? Taking a steadying breath, she shifted her focus back to the students, vanquishing her doubts. "Let's brainstorm ideas. What if our lessons weren't just about history, but about telling stories of resilience, courage, and change? Each of your narratives can culminate into a tapestry of truths that enriches our understanding." The room buzzed with newfound energy, students exchanging thoughts, visions ignited by the thought of personal representation. Claire could see them contemplating how these new lessons might manifest: podcasts, creative projects, even debates drawing from nuanced perspectives. She felt exhilarated watching their enthusiasm, yet apprehension lingered just beneath the surface. The administrator's gaze had shifted, a mixture of skepticism and reluctant acknowledgement forming on his face. Was he contemplating this unplanned pivot with acceptance or apprehension? A strange satisfaction flickered in her chest. Regardless of the outcome, she was catalyzing change. "Miss Reynolds," another student ventured, fire in her eyes, "wouldn't this take away from the, important dates and facts we need for exams?" Claire braced herself, catching the quality of uncertainty in the room again. What if, instead, we start seeing those dates in context? Each fact is part of a story that bridges generations. We can learn to grasp the connections, not just rote memorization. The tensions within the classroom shifted in response, morphing into a shared contemplation. Could they build a reality where students thrive in inquiry rather than stifled under the weight of academic submission?
Her heart raced as she fought to verbalize the gravity of their session. Every story we embrace strengthens our understanding of history and our place in it. Let's drive a curriculum that's not confined but liberating. As each student responded with their burgeoning ideas, Claire couldn't ignore the quiet caution that wrapped itself around her ambitions. Change felt effeminate. She knew that identity was each student's greatest ally. However, would it come at a cost to her own integrity in the educational sphere? Just as quickly as ideas poured in, thoughts of resistance loomed dark and real. What awaited her beyond this powerful moment? Acknowledgement through dialogue with the administration gnawed at the corners of her mind. The encounter felt inevitable. Suddenly, she was standing on the edge of a precipice, fear gripping her stomach. Claire needed to plan her next move, how to present this whirlwind of inspiration in a way that wouldn't stifle the evolving dialogue, but rather elevate it, merging her passion with institutional expectations. The stakes were rising, and as she gathered her thoughts to delve deeper into this narrative transformation, she braced herself for the confrontation with authority that awaited. The question loomed large in her heart. Could she challenge the foundation of education with purpose and redefine her own teaching journey? Claire stared at the whiteboard, a blank canvas that held unlimited potential, and paradoxically, it felt like a daunting wall to scale. Ideas and sketches now crowded her mind, weaving a tapestry of possibilities that intermingled with shadows of apprehension. The classroom was her sanctuary, a realm where she could explore radical concepts. Yet the looming reality of institutional structures threatened to mute her ambitions. She remembered her first day as a teacher, gripping her lesson plan with sweaty palms and a racing heart, feeling the weight of expectation, not just from her students, but from herself. Back then, she had embraced convention, believing in a clear formula for success. Students needed dates and facts, or so she thought. Yet here, faced with their eagerness to challenge the past and shape their futures, she realized how rooted she had been in complacency. With each idea shared, she felt a rising tide of possibility. But this new venture entailed risk. Would her colleagues support her newfound fervor? Claire's mind reeled with the long-term ramifications. Could she endure pushback from those entrenched in traditional methodologies, the very people she had once considered mentors? The path seemed fraught with dangers, an arduous trek that might lead to professional isolation. "Okay, class," she began, drawing the students' attention back to their brainstorming. "I want you to think about how we could represent our school's history through your narratives. Think about your own experiences, someone you admire, a family story, or even an event that shaped this community. How can we bring history alive through your voices?" As students began to share snippets of their heritage, familial anecdotes, and diverse backgrounds, Claire's heart swelled with pride. By nurturing their narratives, she was not only encouraging self-discovery, but also enriching the learning environment. Yet their excitement only underscored the fear that gnawed at her. What if this richness could be viewed as a threat by the administration? "Ms. Reynolds," said a quiet voice, breaking her reverie. It was the same student from before, now a central figure in most discussions. "But how do we make sure this approach is taken seriously? The other teachers, they don't see these stories as valuable." The weight of that honesty pierced Claire, exposing a vulnerability she had been reluctant to acknowledge. "I think we start by showing them the impact our lessons have on you. What if we presented a class project, one that captures your stories and highlights how they connect to historical events? We can create a dynamic presentation for them." Their faces lit up with enthusiasm, a gleaming representation of their margins about to be expanded. But doubts began to reemerge. Could she navigate the administrative labyrinth to advocate for this innovative curriculum? Establishing this new importance on personal narratives would require more than student excitement. It demanded her unwavering commitment and strategic foresight. After class, Claire gravitated to her desk, flipping through her notes. She needed to create a formal proposal that encapsulated their vision, aligning it with the educational mandates she had internalized throughout her career.
It wouldn't be easy to convey the intrinsic value of emotional connections to history within a system steeped in rigid assessments. As she drafted her proposal, a thought fueled her resolve. This could be about so much more than academic change. It could redefine her as an educator. The prospect stimulated her, and yet she felt the familiar stirrings of fear. The war within her grew, the instincts begging her for caution versus the yearning for revolution. Suddenly, a knock on her classroom door roused her from her thoughts. It was Mr. Thompson, the administrator who had eyed her work with skepticism. He had always favored conformity over creativity, an ironclad orthodoxy that made her stomach twist. "Ms. Reynolds," he began, his voice steady but clipped, "I need to speak with you about today's lesson." Claire's heart raced, tension creeping into her gut. Was this the confrontation she had dreaded? The moment of truth had arrived, and she had to brace herself, not just to defend her ideas, but to advocate for her vision of an education that breathed with life and authenticity. Would she rise to the occasion or falter under scrutiny? The seconds seemed to stretch, a taut string ready to snap. Mr. Thompson's piercing gaze felt like a spotlight, illuminating every doubt that flitted through Claire's mind. This was it. She needed to harness her courage before the opportunity slipped through her fingers. She had grown tired of playing it safe, tired of tiptoeing around her passion for innovative education. "Mr. Thompson," she began, her voice firm but unsteady, "I believe today's lesson was a step in a new direction. Our students are eager to connect their personal stories to history. They need to see their voices reflected in the curriculum." He raised an eyebrow, a flicker of skepticism dancing in his eyes. "You're aware that freedom in the classroom doesn't always align with district guidelines." His tone was as cold as the air blowing in. Through the slightly ajar window. "Sure, but are we really educating them if we don't allow creativity and personal connection?" The words tumbling out felt both liberating and rebellious. Claire knew better than to challenge authority overtly, yet beneath the surface of her polite demeanor simmered an unwavering conviction. Personal connection is one thing. Allowing students to dictate curriculum is quite another. His voice dripped with disapproval, but Claire didn't flinch. This wasn't the time to appease. She was ready to embrace the tension, ready to defend her values. "Respectfully, that's not what I'm proposing," she replied, her breath shallow but eyes steady. "I want to use their narratives as a tool, a conduit to foster deeper understanding. By connecting history to their lives, we can create engagement that assessments alone cannot achieve." Mr. Thompson studied her, his expression inscrutable. This was a moment of reckoning, not merely for her proposal, but for her identity as an educator. Was she willing to accept potential backlash? She had always prided herself on her practicality, shutting down her more ambitious ideas for fear of rejection. However, the desire to transform her students' experiences and the depth of her newfound faith in their capabilities ignited something raw within her. "Miss Reynolds, I expect you to consider your position here," he said finally, folding his arms. "Radical shifts within an established institution provoke concern. I suggest you temper your approach if you wish to avoid conflicts." The words twisted in her gut. Not the warning she craved, but a challenge. Would she retreat into her comfort zone or redefine what it meant to be a teacher? "Thank you for your advice, Mr. Thompson. I will reflect on it," she said with a politeness that belied the fire in her soul. Reflect? No, she would act. As the door clicked shut behind him, Claire sat back down and gazed at her outline. The urgency surged through her veins again, this time a clarion call to arms. She needed to transform her proposal into something bulletproof, something that captured both heart and intellect. Every detail had to align with measurable outcomes. She gathered her thoughts and opened a new document. Her fingers danced across the keyboard as she formulated a plan. It would showcase how emotional engagement leads to better retention, citing studies and advocating for curriculum reform. But it would go beyond just numbers and citations.
She would weave in testimonials from her students, emphasizing their need for ownership in their learning. Hours flew by as her determination fueled her focus. The wider implications began to crystallize. This wasn't merely a win for her idea, but a redefinition of her role as an educator. She envisioned herself not just as an instructor, but as an advocate for student voices, a champion for their narratives intertwined with historical discourse. As she clicked save with a sense of finality, an unexpected rush of adrenaline poured over her. Yet, along with the rush, countering thoughts. Was she prepared
for the possible fallout? Would her colleagues back her, or would she stand alone? The uncertainty was a taut, electric wire. She needed allies, to build bridges rather than walls. What if a few colleagues could bring their own student stories into the fold? With a determined spark ignited, Claire resolved to speak with her fellow teachers. She would seek out those who might appreciate innovation and collaboration, envisioning the possibility of a network that could support and amplify her mission. But would they share in her vision or cast her aside? The question lingered, urging her toward action. Tomorrow would be pivotal. Claire would step out of her solitary crusade and into a collaborative future. But first, she had to test the waters. Tomorrow, she would discover whether her colleagues were allies or adversaries in her quest for an educational revolution. Claire awoke the following morning with a surge of adrenaline pulsing through her bloodstream. The sunlight streaming through her window felt like a spotlight, urging her to rise to the occasion. Today was about more than just her proposal. It was about defining her identity as an educator and connecting with her colleagues. She dressed quickly, her heart racing as she imagined possibilities. As she walked into the staff room, the atmosphere was already charged with the usual hum of conversation. Teachers huddled in groups, exchanging stories and planning lessons, but Claire felt an undercurrent of apprehension. Would they embrace her innovative vision, or would they dismiss it as fanciful idealism? She grabbed a cup of coffee and scanned the room. Mrs. Jenkins, a seasoned history instructor known for her engaging lessons, caught Claire's eye. Summoning her courage, Claire approached. "Good morning, Mrs. Jenkins. Do you have a moment to chat?" "Sure, Claire. What's on your mind?" Mrs. Jenkins replied, her warm smile deflating Claire's anxiety just a fraction. "I've been thinking a lot about our approach to history education," Claire began, gauging Mrs. Jenkins's reaction. "What if we allowed students to bring their personal stories into our curriculum? It could make historical events more relatable and engaging for them." Mrs. Jenkins sipped her coffee thoughtfully, her brow furrowing slightly. "You mean having them write about their own experiences alongside historical events?" "Exactly. Their narratives could provide context and depth a standard lesson simply can't achieve. I believe it might help with their engagement and understanding." Claire held her breath, ready for the pushback she had grown so familiar with. "I see your point," Mrs. Jenkins acknowledged slowly. "History is more than dates and facts. It's about the human experience. But how would you manage the curriculum requirements with that?" "I have some ideas on how we can align personal narratives with state standards," Claire replied, her confidence growing as she detailed her plan. "Embedding assessments within these narratives can balance creativity with accountability." She watched as a glimmer of interest sparked in Mrs. Jenkins' eyes. "I'd like to see what you've got," Mrs. Jenkins encouraged. "But remember, not everyone might feel the same way." Claire nodded, appreciating the honesty. "I want to show this can work for our students. Would you be willing to collaborate on this?" Mrs. Jenkins considered for a moment, her expression shifting to contemplation. "I think it's worth exploring, but approach with caution. Some faculty might not be as receptive." Relief washed over Claire like a wave. "Thank you. I'd appreciate having your experience to build on." As they wrapped up their conversation, Claire felt like a weight had lifted. She had taken her first step against the inertia of institutional resistance.
Her next encounter was with Mr. Doe, the science teacher, who was known to have a rigid approach to curriculum. Claire felt her pulse quicken as she remembered his stern demeanor, but pressed forward. "Mr. Doe, can we talk briefly?" "Go ahead, Claire," he replied, looking up from his grading. "I'm working on a project about integrating student narratives into the history curriculum and wanted to know your thoughts," she said, bracing herself for the inevitable skepticism. "Integrating personal stories? Sounds like a recipe for chaos," he retorted, eyeing her critically. "It could also be an opportunity for deeper understanding," Claire countered. "Students learn better when they feel personally connected to the material." "You think so? Students often struggle with discipline in classrooms that allow too much freedom," he shot back, folding his arms defensively. "Perhaps," Claire conceded, "but wouldn't that challenge them to take ownership of their learning? Isn't that what we aim for? Engaged minds?" The tension flickered between them, a silent war of wills. Mr. Doe's rigid demeanor softened just a fraction. "You've got passion, I'll give you that. Just remember, you'll need hard evidence to sway others." Though he remained skeptical, Claire felt a spark of hope. Perhaps persistence could turn skepticism into support. Throughout the day, she reached out to others, each conversation weaving her web of potential allies. As she returned home, the echoes of doubt rattled in her mind. What if her vision crumbled under scrutiny? Yet the flicker of potential fueled her resolve. Tomorrow, her proposal would take shape, a clearer strategy forged from today's discourse. But as she prepared for bed, the shadow of fear lingered. Would she truly have the strength to confront resistance, especially from the staunchest critics? The exhaustion of the day weighed heavy, but sleep eluded her. Claire grappled with the uncertainties looming. It was no longer just about teaching, it was about her professional identity, her commitment to educational integrity. With dawn came decisions, a crossroads she had to face. As she closed her eyes, she sought clarity amidst the storm within. Was she ready for the confrontation that awaited her? Would she find her footing or falter in the fight to reform education? With thoughts racing, Claire drifted off, the answers a whisper on the edge of tomorrow's awakening. As the sun rose, casting a golden hue through her window, Claire sat on the edge of her bed. Determination creeping in to replace the remnants of her restless night. Today was the day she would present her proposal to the faculty, a moment that could either forge her professional path or claw at her insecurities. The stakes felt unbearably high, like a tightrope strung across an abyss. She arrived at school early, heart pounding as she navigated the empty hallways, desperately seeking the quiet solace to gather her thoughts. Pulling out her meticulously organized folder, Claire reviewed her notes. Student engagement statistics, historical teaching methodologies, and anecdotes from her interactions with students. Each piece of evidence was a mantra, bolstering her belief that her approach could ignite meaningful change. As the clock ticked toward the meeting time, the staff room began filling with familiar faces. Claire's stomach twisted with anticipation and trepidation. Would her colleagues share her enthusiasm, or would they once again reinforce the status quo? With each new arrival, she felt both excitement and dread, like a tug-of-war within her. When the moment came, Claire stood before them, her palms sweaty yet steady. The familiar faces of her peers stared back, some attentive, others skeptical. She took a deep breath and began, projecting her voice with a newfound strength. "I want to talk about the power of personal narratives in education and how they can redefine our history curriculum." As she spoke, she watched their reactions closely. Mrs. Jenkins was nodding, while Mr. Doe remained expressionless, still skeptical. Claire pushed through, delivering her ideas with passion, intertwining statistics with examples of students who thrived when given space to share their truths. But as she reached the crux of her proposal, the challenge for each teacher to embrace this method, several heads turned sideways. Doubt manifested in smirks and validating nods among some, while others leaned back defensively. Claire's pulse quickened as she faced the looming question:
How would they react when they were asked to step outside their comfort zones? The first raised hand broke the tension. It was Mrs. Thompson, a pragmatic fourth-grade teacher. "Claire, I appreciate the enthusiasm and the intent, but this seems like it could deviate from our core objectives, don't you think?" "Not at all," Claire replied, steeling herself. "Integrating personal stories can actually enhance core objectives. Students who connect personally with material learn more effectively." The conversation evolved into a vigorous dialogue. Claire found herself embroiled, defending her vision against the weight of tradition. Mr. Doe posed counterarguments, claiming that spontaneity would lead to chaos. Claire countered with her own anecdotes, detailing the success she had seen firsthand when students related personally to the subject matter. As the meeting unfolded, her confidence fluctuated, rising and falling with the tide of questions and doubts. Yet she sensed a shift. More colleagues began to engage, raising their hands, expressing curiosity. Slowly, their skepticism transformed into tentative acceptance, a crucial pivot she hadn't anticipated. Claire felt unyielding excitement rise within her as she wrapped up her presentation. This isn't just about teaching history, it's about empowering our students and allowing them to find their own voices within those historical narratives. We have a chance to reshape their educational experience. The conversation that followed was far from over as more questions arose. Yet, amidst the uncertainty, Claire discovered something unexpected. Her courage was infectious. As she exited the meeting room, Claire walked through the halls, a sense of possibility igniting her spirit. She had laid the groundwork for change, but she also recognized the struggle ahead. There would be those still resistant. The road wouldn't be smooth. Could her vision sustain itself against doubt and criticism, or would she need to adapt further? Just as she arrived at her classroom, her phone buzzed. A message from Mrs. Jenkins read, "Let's schedule some time to dive deeper into your ideas." Claire's heart skipped. Perhaps allies were forming, but uncertainty loomed in equal measure. Was she ready to continue navigating this labyrinth of resistance? As she stood at the threshold of her classroom, Claire knew the next steps demanded even more than mere determination. They required strategic collaboration. What unforeseen hurdles awaited as she moved deeper into this journey? Claire sat at her desk, staring at the outline she had painstakingly drafted, her proposal for integrating personal narratives into the history curriculum. Months of struggle had culminated in this moment, and as she prepared for the final presentation to the board, the flicker of doubt she had grappled with began to settle into an ember of resolve. The school's boardroom, normally a space of stalwart decorum, felt charged with potential that day. Faced with the formidable administrators who had scrutinized her intentions in the past, Claire's heart raced. Yet she could feel the newfound confidence solidifying within her. She was no longer merely a vessel of information, but an advocate for transformation, ready to encapsulate the essence of her journey into a compelling narrative. As her presentation unfolded, each slide reflected her growth, not just as a teacher, but as a woman reconnecting with her family's legacy and embracing her identity through history. She introduced data showing increased student engagement linked to personalized learning, intertwined with testimonials from students who had flourished under her guidance. The room was abuzz with intrigue as she sketched a vision of a classroom where history became alive through individual experiences, a space where authority figures could find common ground with student narratives. Claire spoke with clarity, each sentence born of both passion and conviction. And yet, she concluded, the stories our students share will not just serve to connect them to their own lineage. They will reshape how we perceive history itself. They will turn lessons into dialogues, weaving a richer understanding that transcends textbooks. At that moment, a silence fell, heavy with contemplation. The administrators exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from skepticism to intrigue. It felt as if a shared understanding hung in the air, waiting to be acknowledged. When Mr. Thompson finally broke the silence, his tone was different, tentative yet receptive. "Miss Reynolds, your proposal introduces a compelling angle, and I appreciate the research you've provided. However, how do you plan to measure the effectiveness of these methods?
Traditional metrics for assessments remain important. Claire felt her heart leap. This was her opportunity. Absolutely, Mr. Thompson. I have designed assessments aligned with learning objectives, allowing us to gauge student comprehension while still honoring their personal narratives. It's about finding a balance, opening avenues of creativity without sacrificing academic rigor. The nods around the table encouraged her to continue, propelling her into the next phase of her pitch. She presented her strategies for an initial rollout: pilot programs, workshops for faculty pairing traditional methods with innovative ones, and the incorporation of student feedback loops. The atmosphere shifted palpably. One after another, the board began to express interest, asking questions and engaging with her ideas. Claire witnessed transformation, initial skepticism yielding to curiosity and respect. The weight of the challenges ahead felt lighter, shared by new allies. As she wrapped up, Claire reflected on her evolution over the past few months. This was not merely a professional hurdle, it was deeply personal. She had confronted her fears, unearthed her family's roots, and, above all, had discovered the vibrant connection between her legacy and her present role as a teacher. With thoughtful words of encouragement from 3 members of the board, Claire stepped away from the meeting room feeling lighter, fulfilled. It was clear they would take her proposal to the next steps, a willingness to support her vision, to support her. Walking out of the administrative building, the sun broke through the clouds, illuminating her path. She thought of her students, how their disinterested faces had morphed into eager learners before her, and now how she would advocate to infuse their voices into the very fabric of education. Her mission had transformed from a flicker of an idea into a collective movement towards change. Turning onto the familiar path back to her classroom, she smiled. The apprehensions that once loomed over her were replaced with unshakable confidence. She had achieved more than a proposal. She had conquered her internal battles, established her authority in the educational landscape, and reclaimed the narrative that was both hers and her students'. Empowered by her journey and the profound realization that history was ever evolving, Claire felt ready to embark on the next chapter. No more hiding away, she whispered to herself, determination surging through her veins. This was her commitment to championing the undying relevance of history, her individuality now enshrined within its vast, intricate tapestry. And finally, she was on the path to make that legacy alive and accessible to her students where it truly belonged. Now is the time for you to take action. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and show your support. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending, and don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel.